Good morning, everyone. Happy Hump Day. It's Wednesday, so Avero Advisors is on LinkedIn Live talking about all things related to digital transformation, specifically in the public sector. So, if you are joining us today, we want to know where you're joining from. Talk to us in the comments. We want this live session to be as interactive as possible, and we want you guys to get the most out of it. So ask your questions. We're here for you to answer and talk about all things, again, digital transformation, modernization in the public sector. So today we have a new face on the Avero Advisors live stream, Miss Amanda Patton. So real quick, Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from, and why you joined Avero.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Amanda Patton. I have been in the ERP space in different, capacities for the past 13, 15 years, from the vendor side, and then analyst relations, strategic alliances, and then consultancy for the past, 5 to 7 as a director of ERP, digital transformation and strategy. I'm from Texas. I still live in Texas. And I came to Avero because it's exciting. I love the energy and the culture and the growth, and also just want to help, want to make an impact, want to be part of local municipalities and their ability to help people and help their citizens and all that stuff. So, yeah, happy to be here.
Well,
Thank you.
we're so excited to have you on
Thank
board.
you.
And last week, I thought I was going to have to volunteer some people to join me on the live, but Amanda raised her hand, and it was week 1. So we're excited to have her on the live stream today. So, guys,
I mean,
come at her with questions.
fair,
Yeah.
Robert nudged me. So
Oh,
Robert
okay.
Wallen told me, and then I said, I'll do it.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I
excited.
love the energy you bring, and we're so excited to have you on our director team.
Thank
And you
you.
guys know Robert Krnovich, who is our director. He's not a director. He's the vice president of client success here at Avero. I don't even know your title, Robert. I'm so sorry. I'm just kidding. So, Robert, hit us with something today. What's icebreaker? What's going on in your world right now before we dive in?
I just got off a call with one of my project managers where we talked about how the client, and this goes right into our topic, the client is spending several $1 million to buy a new system and currently is in this rut of they just want to replicate their old system. And this happens fairly frequently after we get in there and we find out, we do a bunch of definitions, process mapping, we get them through the RFP. And it's change management, right? At some point where they get into these sprint sessions and they start rubber banding back to their old system and the way they did it. And they keep asking, well, why can't I just do it the way my old system did it? And we have to remind them, you hated the way your old system did it. You didn't like this report and it was not reliable and it wasn't accurate. This is the outcome that we need to drive you to. And it's that refocus. Because again, ERP it's a long timeline. And it's not necessarily based on the size of the organization that determines that. It's a number of factors I think we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always talk about this being relationships. These projects really are relationships. They're really change management's the biggest thing to do. And I think that just continues to be an undertone on a project that's actually going very well for us, but we're running into a little bit of resistance in this one area where they suddenly want to go back to this old report that they themselves weren't happy with. But that's normal. That's part of being a human involved in the change management process. So I thought it was interesting that just before this call, I was having that conversation with one of my project managers.
I love that. And that's a good segue. So today, guys, we are talking about the good, the bad, the ugly that goes into an ERP transformation. Amanda brings a lot of experience from the private sector. And then obviously Robert and I have worked in the public sector space. And while there are key differences, I think Amanda has experienced a lot of the same things throughout helping her clients navigate their ERP journey. So I want to start really from square one, right? So a lot of times when we are contracted with clients, they are on very old, antiquated systems. Sometimes it's not the case, right? But but typically they are on old home built antiquated systems and sometimes multiple systems, right? So how do we help our clients understand maybe what they're trying to do, because they have to keep these antiquated systems alive, right? And still running. They have cities and counties and transits to run, but they're also working to replace that system. So where do you even begin?
Yeah, and I'll start off here. Data conversion you can talk about on day one. I think that's tends to be their biggest fear and their biggest concern. It also has a major impact on cost and timeline, especially when we're in there helping them with the requirements definition before we even help them put an RFP on the street to procure this new system. So there's several conversations that can happen immediately off the bat. And again, we talked about change management, data conversion is one of them as well. Part of the data conversion discussion, the reason why it's so important is you need to start talking to them about what they will and will not bring over. Because again, to my point earlier, if you think you're just going to get a shiny new version of your existing system, I mean, you can do that. And the software vendor in some ways would prefer you do that. But you really need to figure out what you want to bring over and what makes sense to bring over. Hence the reason why data conversion is such a key discussion on almost any project at any particular point that we're brought in.
Yeah. Amanda, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I would echo everything that I've heard, but data is a huge thing to start talking about upfront because it takes a lot longer than people expect. It's a lot messier. So I think that's a great call out. Process too is, because if all we're going to do is buy a new system and automate bad process, why are we doing that? Right. And so starting these conversations with why are we doing this in the first place? What are the pain points? What are we solving for? What needs to be fixed in the process and with the people, with communication and change and all that kind of thing. And it always reminds me of like you hire a trainer or a nutritionist and then they kind of get on to you because you're not following the plan. And we don't typically fire them, right? We hired them to tell us things that we may not want to hear sometimes. And so that's another part of it for me anyways, is just having a really honest conversation up front. Like, guys, this is going to be, not all fun and games all the time. We will have fun and we're going to get a lot done, but there will be some tough conversations and we want to be transparent and have communication. And I think talking about data, people, and process up front and getting a plan together and a timeline is just very important, and setting realistic expectations for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Amanda. I know there's a lot of conversation around this phase 0, right? And what goes into phase 0 before you even start talking about, business process, right? Phase 0 is really where you get everyone on the same page, right? You get all the executives in a room and you do what we call executive alignment, right? What are you looking to achieve by purchasing a new ERP system? And that vision should be set from day one, from phase 0. And so that way, when you are leading this change, you always have that vision to fall back on, right? This is the reason why we are doing this. A lot of times when we go into interviews and presentations, we ask the question, why are you guys doing this and why now? Because it gives us a better understanding, right, of what their vision is for the future. So I couldn't agree with you more, Amanda. That's great. Anything else to add?
Yeah, we look at the government process for procurement as being slow and methodical, and for a lot of reasons, because you're operating in the realm of public trust. These are public funds. There has to be transparency on how you procure these systems. So there tends to be a variety of steps and processes that have to be followed to be able to maintain that public trust. The benefit you get as a local gov organization, though, is it's a great opportunity to get everyone, in the room for the same discussion and get some consensus, which is very hard to do otherwise. That these selection committees can be large and it can be daunting, and it can drag decisions out and become problematic. But it's a great way to get everyone on the same page before you get to a pre-implementation or an implementation. And that is so key and that's so important because those conversations otherwise don't happen. There's a million reasons why I don't want to bring all my directors into the room and all their process owners and have a discussion as what the new system needs to do. And we help facilitate that because we know how to do that while respecting your time and your staff's time. Otherwise, it's always going to be deprioritized. So I think the benefit local government organizations have is you have the chance to get everyone on the same page. You have a chance to figure out what your message is. And to one of the questions I just saw pop in, you also need to start talking about how you want to classify your data, because that's going to determine how much you want to spend to bring something over versus I can just keep this in an old environment, or I can use an alternative way for capturing that data and not have to spend the money to bring it into my ERP system. So the ability to use that procurement process and selection process with government does have that benefit. And I know a lot of people are just like, get me on something new. I hate what I'm on. You still have to go through those pains because you don't want to have to go through them later on in implementation. It's easier to just do it up front, get all that figured out. And all that spills into contract negotiations. We have a clear consensus of what we're looking for, interpretation of the SOW, all the way to go live, post go live. So the process that government has to follow can bring a lot of benefits, as well as the concern, that it's going to take me a year to select a new ERP system. There's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 points I want to make here. So Mick asked the question, how do you determine what data needs to be migrated and why? So a lot of times our clients and prospects, they come to us and they were like, what is the standard of the amount of data I should go back and carry over into the new system? So I want to get your thoughts on that, because I think that's a myth that we bust a lot, because it really depends. But I want to hear your all's thoughts.
Robert, I don't know what, coming from where I come from, we hear everything, 2 years, 7 years, 10 years, it depends. And, all of that kind of thing. It depends on your industry. It depends on regulatory and IRS type of stuff. And some people are going to have their systems running parallel for a while. Some are not. And so there's a lot of a lot of people think they need to bring over way more than they do. And it creates so much heartburn and so much work that really isn't necessary, because a lot of that can be archived and you can still go back if you need historical and or transactional. It just, again, it depends. But Robert, I'll let you, most people say, oh no, we need 10, 20, 7, 10 years. And that's usually not true. We usually say 2 to 3, but it really is a case by case. Robert?
Yeah, absolutely consistent. Everyone always thinks they need to keep more. It's sort of like it's like a comfort blanket. They don't know exactly how they're going to use it, but they don't want to lose that data and they want it to be there. So it's roughly 2 to 3 years, especially with accounting, tends to be everyone's comfort zone. But it's very common for us to get in there and someone says 10 years, or can I have it all? Or in the case of some states, when they have to keep track of information regarding employees' retirement, especially a state pension system, some states require you to keep that stuff forever. But how often are you going to access a record from someone that retired 17 years ago that was with the school district for 25 years? You have to have access to that data, but you certainly don't need to spend the money to put it into your current ERP system. But it's consistent. Every client we go in there, they start with, well, I'd like 10 years, but if you ask them privately, they're like, why can't I just bring it all over? Because then your ERP cost is going to be 7 times what your current budget is, because people are willing to do that. They're willing to do the data conversion for you, but you're going to spend an awful lot of money. So hence the reason to talk early. There's a give and take. There's tons of solutions now available for maintaining that data in a different environment that's much lower cost, because you don't need it every single day. So there's a lot of great solutions that are a heck of a lot cheaper than trying to drag everything into your new ERP system.
And
Yeah,
Mike just posted a comment that I was actually going to say too, because it's like the more you bring over, the more it's going to cost. Now it's more to maintain, it's more to cleanse, it's more to dedupe. And also, if you don't need it in your day-to-day life, why clutter the system with that, right? You're going to have it archived somewhere to where if somebody says, I need this information from 25 years ago, it's not gone forever, but you don't need it in your system. So, and it's hard because people have to let that go. It is a security blanket. And I think it takes time, but as long as they know it's still there somewhere, most people end up being okay with 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you joined us today. We're going to have to rope you into one of these live streams one day. So, more to come on that. But thank you so much for joining us. And thank you guys who have posted comments. I'm going to go to the comment box really quick. So, Brian's joining us, Mick is joining us, Mike Nollup, we said, hey, Corey is joining us today. They love your nutrition and trainer analogy, Amanda, and I loved it too. I think that's great. I think we need some more content just around that analogy alone. So Mick says, Megan, do you think we're talking about phase 0 enough? No, I do not. If you guys have seen my short on this on my LinkedIn profile, I got a little sassy because I don't think that we are talking about phase 0 enough. I don't think that we're strategizing around why this, why now. You know, I find it very hard to believe that organizations just say we need a new ERP system and that's it. Like we want to go spend millions of dollars just to purchase this new thing and plug it in. That is not the approach that you need to be taking to this, because the risk is that you have a failed implementation and you're in the same spot you were in 3 years ago when you decided to do this project. So I don't think we're talking about phase 0. No. So I know we've talked a little bit about this. So how do we do this in our day-to-day project methodology, this phase 0? What do we bring to the table when we're talking to our clients, during the kickoff meeting, maybe even during the pre-kickoff meeting? What is our approach?
Yeah, for me, it's what you said, Megan, which is why this, why now? Because the messaging and the reason behind it and the dynamic that's currently within the organization and how you tie this to overall funding sources, because what you always risk with ERP is elected officials love one-time purchases, right?
Mm-hmm.
Recurring liabilities or recurring costs, they do not like it. So their mindset a lot of times is usually just, well, if I buy this new system, everything's going to be great, right? If we just hand you guys $5 million, this will be taken off our plate and we don't have to worry about it. And that's great to have that kind of funding, but there's a sustainable aspect behind ERP, as well as the staffing consideration, which is probably the most important with quasi-gov and government entities, which is you're not going to be able to blow up your staffing by like 20 or 30 people if you're a large organization just dedicated to ERP and then convert their positions into something else when ERP is done, which of course it truly never is. You just pull back a lot on resources, but there's still a baseline that you have to have there. These are the discussions that some clients have and have already figured out before we get in the door. It's not a real great percentage, maybe 10% of them. So that's another reason why you need the phase 0 aspect of not only how are you going to do this now, what are you going to do post go live? How are you going to maintain this? Does your IT staff need to learn some new skills to be able to stay relevant to the system? Does your IT staff even need to be involved to a great degree on a lot of these things? So those discussions have to happen. They rarely do because our clients don't go through ERP replacements every 3 or 4 years, or at least you shouldn't be. So you don't know what you don't know. And there's some people who have never gone through an ERP replacement. And they're just like, I'm just getting the best information I can, and I think we're ready to do this. So the sooner they bring us in or allow us to have that phase 0 discussion, the better we can set them up for tackling what they need to do in terms of resourcing in future budget years, but also the overall message. What's going to be success to your governing body? Because you're going to have to step in front of the microphone and explain how well this $5 million project went. And if you can't tie it to something palpable or something important, you're not going to have people that are going to be very enthused about the money you just spent.
Yeah. I think, clear prioritization plays a huge role in phase 0, right? Because you talked about, Robert, your resource constraints and what role is everyone going to play in this? So making sure that you prioritize things on the front end, I think, is very key to phase 0 as well. Amanda, do you have any other thoughts?
I do. This is a huge thing for me. I am a planner to the core, to my detriment sometimes, but plan your work your plan, measure twice, cut once. I like to use analogies and keep things in simple speak. But, if you don't spend the time and the pain, quite frankly, up front, it is so much more expensive and more painful down the road, either during implementation, or post or failure, which is worst case scenario. But, for me, trying to understand why are we doing this again? What are we solving for? Because if you think you're just going to lift and shift and we're just going to get rid of this and pull this in and then we're just going to keep on our merry way, it's not a very useful exercise. We want to improve things. We want to improve efficiencies. And it's not these big ERPs all the time now only. There's composable and there's modular. And what do we need to fix first? What's the most painful thing? Maybe we start looking at it that way. So when you're talking about triaging or prioritizing, that's very important. But if you look at these projects all at once, it's overwhelming. It feels insurmountable from a data perspective, from a process, the whole thing. And so for me, I want to talk early on about how we're going to plan it and keep from having change fatigue and overwhelming everyone. And then also easing into this idea where we are going to come in and process owners are going to talk and we're going to start breaking down some silos and we're going to figure out where we can achieve efficiencies across the board. So the planning takes more time than anything. And it's frustrating because we're impatient, right? We just want to get in there. We want to pick a system. We want to get going. I think that's usually a mistake. And so to kind of slow it down and be patient and ask again, what are we trying to do? Because getting a new system for the sake of getting a new system doesn't achieve much at all. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I love it. I love it. I think we got you on your soapbox a little bit.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's a big thing for me. Yeah.
I love it. Yes. Same for me, too. It's so key. Just planning so that you don't overspend and that you know what is about to come and you know who's going to be pulled from where, right? Because the reality of it is these people have day jobs. They have counties and cities and transits and airports to run. How do you do this while still having to have the responsibility of an executive director or HR director, CFO? How do you do that? I don't know how people do it on their own, and that's what scares me about all of this. And two, it's like Robert said, these people that we deal with on a daily basis, they haven't gone through an ERP transformation or modernization probably ever. There are few and far between who have done it before, but where do they get their information? How do they know how to go about this? They don't, which is the whole reason why we go live every Wednesday, because we want to be a clearinghouse of information for these clients and for these prospects. And ultimately, we want to help hold your hand through this process. So that's my soapbox today. We do have a good question in the comments, and I want to get to it. So, Corey, and if you guys haven't met Corey is my new teammate who has been with us for about a month. He is the business development coordinator, so you will be seeing more of him. But he says, what has been the most difficult part of aligning cross-departmental needs during an ERP project? And how have you navigated situations where departments have competing priorities? That's a very good question. So who wants to go first?
We talked about this before. There's a political aspect to a lot of these that you have a switch from CIOs being the project sponsor and the one leading the projects to now it's going into the hands of the chief HR officer or the CFO. If there is some dynamic that those folks have not worked cohesively as a team, there are going to be these political aspects of it that fall into place. One of my dearest clients, I love him dearly, but the very first kickoff meeting we had with him is I just want to make this clear that we're doing financials and HR, but this is a 51% financials ERP project, which is his way of putting a stake in the ground of finance is leading the way, and we're going to make a lot of these decisions. We're going to determine how this is going to be rolled out, and it's going to be within consideration of our timeline, but we get the extra vote. We get the extra percentage point. So getting in there and seeing what that dynamic is, and you're not going to be able to solve their political issues for them, but you can figure out what dynamic works best given that. One of the reasons why the CFO is the most important, though, is because they are in charge of what they're in charge of. They do set a lot of the tone for the organization overall, and it does overlap into HR. But you still need to be able to tackle HR's needs and priorities. And if the CFO and the HR director are at complete odds as to what that means, you're going to have to do a lot of work in phase 0 to figure out how are we actually going to roll this out without having each one of you go, well, I want this system, so just give me this system, and I don't care what HR gets. They can go out and get their own system. And if they talk together, great. If they don't, who cares? So sometimes it's just dealing with that dynamic coming in the door. Other times they haven't really defined any sort of a strategy. To your point, Megan, they don't know how this goes. Do we need to lean more on HR services and employee portals to be able to automatically transact business and do a lot of automation? They still need to figure that out so we can get in there and give them some guidance and direction. But the most difficult ones by far are there's already an atmosphere in there that the CFO and the HR director don't get along, and that we're going to have to really nail down some messaging and how we're going to do this project, because we're not going to be able to just go down the road with two departments being completely siloed, either in a selection process or let alone a go live or an implementation or even a pre-implementation. It affects too much across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Robert, we have a good example of one of our clients who, the project kind of took a pause because they needed to do an IT strategic plan right in the middle of it. So let's talk about that a little bit and why that came about. And, I think they were very open and honest with us. Like, we probably should have done this piece first. But can you go into a little bit more detail about that particular client?
Yeah, a client that does not have a lot of connectivity to their buildings is the first thing. So figuring out how you're going to implement a modern ERP when they don't even have connections to be able to run automated time clocking. They're still using time clocks from the 50s in a lot of their buildings, and they're using that to track time and do payroll. And we had talked about that early on, but folks don't have unlimited funds. They can't just throw a bunch of money or stop a particular project and go, well, let's do this first, and then we can do that. We have to be sensitive to that. But they had approached us with some concerns of their own about what was going on with their operations. And they were like, we really trust you guys, and we like you guys, and we know that you do this. Can you do this for us now so we can just tackle this? And this allows us to go and get some budgeting with this kind of ammunition to demonstrate what we're going to do with those funds and why we need them to be able to solve these issues. And in short term, they didn't pause the ERP project, but they slowed it down a little bit because they knew that this needed to be tackled very quickly. And we came in with a very aggressive timeline and got a lot of that turned around and got them some recommendations and some quick, easy wins to be able to tackle those issues. So now the ERP project is going to be much more successful than it was before. There was an element of, well, we hope we have this solved by then. Now they have a plan of action of, yes, we will have this solved by the time we deploy the HR and timekeeping aspect of this. We will have these back-end technology issues solved and mitigated so that we're not going to have a problem being able to do this Q3 of 2026. So great example of came to us as trusted advisors. We know you guys can do it. Can you do this quickly? Answer was yes. And we're able to knock it out and keep them on track to where they needed to be.
Yes, the answer is always yes. We can absolutely help you. We're smart. We can figure it out. So this is a good case study, though, because it turns out this particular organization did not have an internal IT department. So let's talk about that a little bit, Robert. Is that common in the public sector to not have your IT housed internally?
Yeah, that could be, and it's. I think it's not specific to government as well. It can be a variety of cases. We've even dealt with a county that was way overstaffed with IT, but they had no clear direction where they were going and what they wanted to do, and they had a severe accountability issue as well. But they had more than enough IT resources that most counties would look at and go, are you kidding me? I would love to be able to have that kind of ratio to IT member to number of devices or to number of employees. A variety of ways of looking at that. But there's also some folks have been able to leverage managed services to a great degree. And so they don't need to be able to continuously hire IT staff. They can keep small and lean and then outsource the stuff that they don't do on a regular basis. They don't replace their firewalls every day. They don't upgrade their mail servers. They don't move their VM enclosures to SaaS or to some other kind of a setup. They don't do that on a daily basis. So then why spend that kind of money to train your staff or hire someone to do that, which is going to be a great cost? You can just outsource that at a much lower cost. But it comes back to the funding aspect being finite. Resources, therefore, are finite. But then there's also the vision as to what you want to do. If you really want to be customer service oriented as an IT department, you're going to have someone on site or available to do help desk. So you can outsource some of these other functions, but you want to keep help desk in-house. The trick is going to be are you going to actually be able to do that? And through service level agreements and some other definitions, which a lot of departments typically don't have, they lack those in particular. It becomes difficult to go and justify your budget every single year as to why you want to keep these 3 IT folks. And most of them are doing help desk. So you need a lot of dashboarding, you need a lot of data in those particular situations. I think that's common with a lot of departments too. They're asked to be doing a lot with very minimal resources. And so a lot of that stuff just gets naturally deprioritized because I need to put out fires every day. I don't have time to put together a dashboard to determine how many help desk tickets I'm solving. So we always talk about it varies from organization to organization, but there are a lot of themes that are very common that seem to pop up on a regular basis. And I think the resourcing is the first one. And 2, a lot of IT departments just don't have a clear definition as to what type of service they do want to offer and they're expected to offer. And that just leaves you in a very reactive state rather than be able to be proactive. And I used to be in IT for 20 years in local gov. It is so easy to be reactive. It is very difficult to find ways and find time to become proactive. So I get it. And that's why we do what we do with helping clients in those situations.
That's right. That's right. Amanda, is it any different in the private sector? Are there still those silos between IT and other departments? How does that work? Or what has been your experience with the IT department and the private sector?
100%. If you're dealing with human beings, this is going to be a thing. And so I was thinking of a couple examples too. I did a project a couple of years ago where they were running over 29 different ERPs. But it was because they were so siloed and they were reactive. We need this, I need that, I need this. And this department, they were just trying to fix things with Band-Aids. And so at some point you have this wobbling tower of technology that's not really not supported. Nobody's keeping it. So that is a major issue, right? And it's like, this is why we need a 5-year TCO. This is why we need a roadmap. This is why we need to know where we're going before we start the trip. Because all the things that Robert was just talking about, even with, if you're on-prem and you're not set up for Wi-Fi and whatnot, and you're going to go to the cloud, like there's a lot of different things that may need to be addressed. And it's that crawl, walk, run. And a lot of people just want to run. And we really need to start kind of, so that was a good example. And most of that was through acquisitions, right? And so that's one reason. But the other reason is departments were going and getting this bolt on, or they went to a conference and saw something shiny and they bought it. Well, at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't talk to each other. You've got data all over the place. There is no single source of truth. And so they end up in a situation where, they're trying to get all that cleaned up and get their data cleaned up. The other thing too, I had a client that, operations and IT were like a daily death match. Just could not stand each other, did not like to work together, and would kind of just fight and even sabotage some things for territorial reasons. And so, like you said, we can't fix cultural problems, and I'm not a counselor, but you can figure out where are the wins for everybody. Some teams will have to get the short end of the stick in some decisions, but you'll get a win over here and vice versa. And so, a lot of people just assume this is an IT project, and it isn't, right? It's operations. It's everybody, because it is the whole organization. Yeah. But people want to jockey for power because they want to make sure that their teams and their needs are met, which is that's a normal expectation, I think. So I think part of it is knowing where those problems are, and really understanding, what what the end goal is, where we're going, and then trying to figure out how to break down those silos. And if we all work together, it's going to make it easier for everyone in the end. But a lot of times I've had clients that went out and bought a big, fancy ERP, and they needed to add 30 headcount to run the system now. And that's not so, like Robert was saying with managed services, that's definitely something, especially in the public sector, I would assume is even more important. So yeah, I think that is something we are always on the lookout for. And when you tell a client something that is hard to hear or doesn't go along with their plan, it can cause some conflict, and that's okay. We are solving problems together as a team, shared fate, as Robert always talks about. And so, that's really important that we can have those conversations, and try to get IT and operations in the same room and, find some common ground so we can get a successful project underway. So, yeah, I see this a lot as well.
I know
Yes.
there's clients out there right now watching this going, I thought I was the only organization that fought with our CIO.
Yeah.
Or yeah, it's there. It's there to some degree in every type of organization. Like we tell clients, you're not alone. We've been through a lot of varieties of how this plays out successfully. And so, but it's tough when you're in an organization, when you're transit authority and you're the only one within 100 or 200 miles, it's easy to feel like we are the only ones having these problems. We're the only ones that understand exactly how this has to be. And that's where our experience helps, make sure that you can get through this and you can be successful. It's very rare that something is put up that we have not seen before. I mean, our staff has seen a lot.
Yeah, it goes back to our why. This is why we want to share that knowledge with you all so that you don't feel alone, right? And that that you do have a partner in this. And we are going to sit with you at the table to help you define, what success looks like and what that path forward is. So, sorry, that is my passion. I love being able to help clients solve those problems, because at the end of the day, guys, we're changing lives, not just internally within the organization, but to the constituents that they serve, right? And it's a big deal. It is a big deal, the work that we do. I want to talk about morale a little bit. It's come up here and there throughout our conversation today, but sometimes, or all the time, throughout the project, there are some morale issues, right? There are people who are very resistive to change. And I saw Clay joined earlier. Guys, Clay is one of our change management experts on the Avero team. So Clay, please feel free to chime in here. But how do we approach someone who is experiencing low morale, or a team that's experiencing low morale? How do we approach that?
You want to start off, Amanda?
Well, I'm going to say what I always say about everything. It depends, right, on the environment, the leadership, the culture. I use a lot of analogies, and this is another one. People are going to get tired of hearing it. But, I don't call someone and say, hey, can you build me a house? How much is it going to cost? Right? Like, there is a long blueprinting phase. There's looking at the land and the school districts and like everything that's going on around it. And then you spend a lot of time with an architect or with the layout and all that kind of stuff. And now I've got floor guys and plumbers and electricians, and I've got to coordinate all that, not only in a sequential dependency type of nature, but like we all have to get along. And so that's what I think of when I think of these projects, because it's a lot. You have swim lanes and work streams, and there's stuff running parallel, and it can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. If you go into something that is a little bit of a stress test as a human being and as a municipality or an organization, and you're not in a healthy morale, that is going to, all kinds of stuff is going to come out sideways. And we've all seen it. It's like a family, like, we got to deal with our stuff. And so that's a big part of it, is like, where are we starting? And that's what that executive alignment stuff in the beginning helps to start to identify. We can start to sniff out where the competition is, where the different goals, even. Maybe the CIO sees it one way in 5 years, and the CEO has a completely different vision. That's something we've got to address first at the top before we move forward. And then figuring out, why is morale the way it is? Are people working too hard? Do they not feel heard? Are people not in alignment? Like, what's causing that misalignment? And then trying to figure out, I know it sounds cheesy, but, team building and just trying to learn more about each other personally, humanizing one another, and trying to understand, okay, so where are we going and why are we going there? And that shows up in all kinds of different ways. We've had people name their projects. We've had them make t-shirts. We've had MVP trophies. We've had pizza parties. People, there's a lot of ways to motivate, make it fun and get excited, but also to understand change fatigue. Like you said, people have day jobs, they have families, they have all these responsibilities. And now this is kind of like another job. More so for some roles. Some roles are, these things consume a lot of their time, right? That's why we're here to help with that. But I think understanding what that's going to look like, and if that means the timeline, instead of 40 hours a week for this team for 12 months, maybe it's 25 hours a week for that team for 18 months. Maybe we figure out ways to just make it more sustainable. Those are some of the ways to help with morale. And yeah, I'm sure people have a lot of examples. I don't know what kind of stuff you guys do, but I have some cheesy examples, but I'll let you go, Robert.
Yeah, mine is just a lot of times I just acknowledge up front that, these are the type of projects that bring out everyone's insecurities. And a lot of times it's just baseline thing. You talk to an executive and it's like, what are you looking to do here? What's your biggest concern? And theirs is, I want to retire in 5 years. I want to leave this organization in better shape than when I started, and on a good ERP system that later on people aren't going to use my name in vain when they talk about that ERP system, because I was the one who pushed for it and implemented. And so a lot of time, and not everyone's willing to have that discussion, right? Especially if you already are like, you're concerned, like I think I have a pretty good idea of what my department is doing. I'm concerned these consultants are going to come in and they're going to find all these holes and they're going to put me up against a best practice, which doesn't actually apply to me. And they're going to tell me that, well, I'm in terrible shape and I'm the reason why we can't proceed on ERP. Incredibly rare that happens. But a lot of time, just acknowledging that this is going to bring out a lot of risk aversion and insecurities in a lot of people all the way up and down the line. Am I going to be able to get trained properly on this product? Is it going to be too advanced for someone like me? Is someone going to find out that I actually don't know how to do this part of my job, or that we never figured this particular part out? And is the change going to be too much? Do I need to think about retiring because I can't compete with the new ERP system? Or it's the last thing I need to be dealing with right now. I already have these other 7 priorities. I think a lot of it just winds up coming down to, what's your risk aversion? What's your biggest fear or concern? And let me help alleviate that and show you there is a path forward. And yes, you're going to find holes in processes, and you're going to discover that this hasn't been done right for 22 years and there's a better way to do it. That is completely natural, and it's part of the process. And every organization goes through that, and it's okay. It'll be fine. We'll be able to get through that and get you onto just a much better system. Doesn't always work. But a majority of the time, just having that discussion of, tell me what your biggest concern. I just had it with an executive director a couple of weeks ago. Nice polite conversation about the project and where it's going, get to know each other. And like, what's your biggest concern? And his concern was, if this doesn't work well, my career is done. Like, okay, well, we can check in on that on a regular basis, and I will give you the assurance you need that this will go well and that we're mitigating all the risks. There's a variety of backstops that we have here. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to talk about those, if you feel like you're not getting the answer. And his answer was great. He was like, I trust my people. I delegate well to them. they're going to be able to tell me when things aren't going well, and we're going to be able to have that discussion. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and it was great. We didn't come out of the meeting operating on some sort of an assumption. We actually cleared the air on what the concerns are and how we're going to deal with his concerns when they come up. He's going to go to his staff first and try and get an answer. If he can't, then he'll give me a call. I think that's the biggest key. Doesn't solve everything, but just setting that tone up front of when we do have problems and things pop up, we're going to be able to take care of that, and we're going to mitigate it, and we're going to talk about it very early and not let it fester or allow some underlying assumption to carry the message. Let's figure out what the real message is and what we need to do to solve it.
We communicate early and often, always. So Brian has a great comment and a question. So Brian says, I find organizations often believe that because their staff don't like their current systems, they are not going to experience resistance to making changes and will be on board with anything new that comes along. How do you ensure that a project is identifying and addressing other factors that will limit people's ability and willingness to absorb changes? Let's see if I can share that. Not the whole question.
I can speak to this really quick. I mean, just to piggyback on what Robert was saying, like you can find champions and change agents who are enthusiastic to help change morale too. So I just wanted to say that you kind of plant those people, because sometimes you can't get everybody on the same page, but you will always have those people who want to lead that change that can be sprinkled about to lead others. On what Brian is saying, this is such a great point, because people are like, yes, we hate our system. It is just so clunky. It takes forever. We are so ready for something new. And there's that excitement and that momentum. And then it comes down to brass tacks of like the process mapping and the actual change and, the real work of it, which is going to happen no matter what. And that is very difficult to navigate sometimes, unless, again, we are honest, we are having tough communications. It's not an indictment on anybody personally, on your performance, on how you're doing things or how you've been doing things. We are all growing and evolving all the time, hopefully. So that's another thing. It can feel you can take things personally. Why are y'all doing it like this? This doesn't even make sense, or what that can start to, so I think keeping the sessions from turning into these long complaint sessions, we're in solution mode, right? We understand this isn't working. What are some alternatives? What is on your wish list? What would be ideal for you in this role, right? And start mapping to that future state. Let people vent a little bit and talk about how terrible things are. And then, okay, you had your 5 minutes. Let's get into solution mode. We've got to be in that constant productive mode to be efficient and to save money and to stay on our timeline and all that kind of stuff. But also just because we're trying to fix things together.
Right.
And the commiserating can be a little bit addictive sometimes. So I think that's the hard part too. As facilitators, we've got to make sure that people do have some space to vent a little bit, and then we get into solution mode. And that is another hard conversation sometimes to have, when you as a facilitator have to interrupt and say, guys, we need to get back on track. We have a lot to cover today, and not everybody really likes that, but it is part of why we're there.
That's right. Robert, anything else to add?
Yeah, we're willing to have the hard conversations because they're going to come up eventually. And they need to be had. And like we tell a lot of clients, we don't operate on assumptions. We don't allow software vendors to operate on assumptions. We're going to be pretty aggressive at making sure that we talk about the things we need to talk about, especially as early as possible. There's nothing that just replaces the ability to have an honest conversation to solve a problem. I mean, we've all tried in a variety of ways to have some separate way of getting around a problem and getting it solved. And it never is a better solution or has less issues coming out of it than just have as direct a conversation as you can have. Some clients don't want to have that direct conversations. We always talk about too, how you have to be careful when you're working with executive leadership. You don't ever put them in a corner and then force them to make a decision. Then no one reacts well to that. We don't react well to that as consultants as well. But have the conversation. and bring up the topic and make sure it's as clear as you possibly can be and that there is a resolution there. And it still is the only way I know of truly solving a problem quickly with minimal collateral damage that also keeps things on track. And everyone leaves the meeting, might not be feeling good because they realize there's something they now need to tackle internally to be able to lift the impediment on the project. But everyone leaves the room going, okay, I get it. This is what we need to do. And this is the problem. This is the action that needs to be taken. And that's how you keep these projects rolling forward. And that's how you keep the messaging going. That's how you get people to stay engaged with the overall momentum of it. Is, you know what, I might not like the answer, but I'm going to get a clear answer. I'm going to know what I do and do not need to do.
Yes. And I'm going to jump back on my soapbox a little bit. You guys have heard me complain about this on my own profile, but the relationship building piece is key when you're talking about change management and when you're talking about, being able to have those tough conversations. You've got to have a relationship with the people that you're doing this work for. And the one way to do that is by being on site a lot. It kills me when our competitors, they ask the question of how often do you need me to be in your building, and to me that it's mind boggling because these projects, there are so many moving pieces. There needs to be somebody. If you're hiring a consultant, they need to be on site the majority of the project. Now, Robert's giving me the eye like, well, there are some things that can be done virtually, but for the most part, your consultant needs to be there holding your hand and building that relationship with you. So let me go. We're going to wrap up here in a minute. This has been a great conversation, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Caleb says hindsight is 2020 given everyone's lengthy experience in our industry. Do you all have a relative moment in your career at which you could point to that you started feeling more and more confident in addressing challenges presented to you, such as those mentioned during today? If so, what was it that clicked for you?
I wanted to weigh in really quickly on a couple things. I'm sorry, I'm so OCD that I have a hard time letting go of questions that I saw. On the data thing, there was a question about who's ultimately responsible. It is the client. It is the client. Vendors will say they will do it, or they will help you, or this or that. Like at the end of the day, just know that you're responsible for your data. Yes, you can get help, but no one knows your data as intimately as you do. Your vendors, your customers. So if you hire a team of people to do it, sure, they can cleanse it and get it migrated over. But at the end of the day, you've got to have a very close relationship with that data. And they will send you templates and DMTs and all this stuff to move things over. But that's more of a mapping thing. That is not data cleansing. So I just wanted to get that out there because that's huge. And then I think one other thing real quick is just to meet people where they are. The resistance to change sometimes is like on manufacturing floor or on a, in a community, different services. People have a traveler or a piece of paper, or they have something that they're attached to for a really long time, and this technology threatens to take that away. So I think the change is different for everybody, whether you're driving a bus or you're like, that's another important part too, which is why being on site does help. You get sidebar conversations, you get to talk to people off in the corner who won't talk about how they're feeling in front of a group. So those types of things. So I just wanted to say that. And then on Caleb's question,
it's a hard one. It's a tough
one.
It
is
about confidence, because I do think, as you grow in your experience, obviously with more experience comes confidence. But I also think with Caleb's question is you have to know your abilities and what you bring to the project. Like, what are your strengths, right? You have to know yourself, and you have to be confident in that you know yourself and you know your strengths and you know what you bring to the table. Because I think for me, being in business development is a lot different than being in project delivery, but I have to know what I'm talking about to be able to portray it to the world. But I say this all the time. At one point in time, I thought I needed to be AV. AV and I are two very different people, and I don't speak like he speaks. I speak like Megan speaks. And the reason Megan was hired is because of the way I speak and because of the vulnerability that I give and the ease that I give to people. So knowing that I can do that gives me the confidence I need to be on a live stream or go on video or go talk to somebody. So Caleb, I don't know if that helps you at all, but that's my perspective.
And Sarah posted a great answer, or her insight or her perspective as well. But like that same thing for me. For one thing, the older you get, I'll speak for myself, you just feel more comfortable with yourself because you've experienced things and you've been in a lot of situations. And when I didn't speak up or say something that I intuitively felt, I regretted it later because it was actually a good point. And I didn't trust myself because I didn't have that confidence because I didn't know yet. And over time, you have enough of that retrospective time to go, I should have spoken up. And then you just learn to trust yourself, and you'll never know all the answers. No one is ever going to know all the answers. That can't be the goal. If it is, we'll all go nuts. And so show up, be yourself, keep learning, and mostly just ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Maybe you look silly sometimes. I mean, that's just a part of, being a human. But it's very, trial and error, I guess. And then you just learn over time, but ultimately for me, it's being authentic. Be a real person who uses regular words and who meets people where they are. Don't be condescending. Don't act like you know things that, know more than other people. Because a lot of clients, we've seen vendors and different people come in and kind of talk down to them or use jargon or just, and that is not a good way to build a relationship, right? Just be a regular person. That's my advice. And if you make mistakes, it's okay.
That's how we learn. We all make mistakes, right? Robert, any closing thoughts to Caleb's question?
I agree with all that, especially the lifelong learner. I learn new things every day. And it's so true. And you have to be authentic and you have to be yourself. I completely agree with the way you guys surmise that. That's very true.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Again, we go live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. If there is something particular you want us to talk about, please reach out either in the comments box or via Messenger. We're always there answering your all's questions. We'd love to hear from you guys. And again, we're active on all social media platforms, and we need a follow. We need a like. So share our content and make sure that you guys are helping us get the word out. But without further ado, we'll see you next week. And Robert, Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today. I think our viewers got a lot of great advice from the two of you. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was fun.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. See you later. Bye.